Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm your host, Jonathan Grabowski. We are in 2022 fall election season, and joining us is someone very familiar to many of you in Plymouth County. It's our Sheriff, Joe McDonald. Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, John, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad to be here.
It's a nice year for you. You're running unopposed, but we always like to have the candidates on, opposed or unopposed. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people, it's easy to lose you in the shuffle because you get a lot of requests and a lot of high profile issues taking place, and if there's nobody really to debate those, those of us without an opponent fade to the background. But it's unusual for me. A lot of people have said, how does it feel? And it's unusual because this is the first time I've ever run unopposed. Really? Wow. Yeah. I'm not complaining.
I can imagine.
But I'd still, I'm still getting out there and meeting people and talking to people about the issues. And
why you're here today.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Yeah.
And so for those that don't know you, who is the Sheriff Joe McDonald?
Thank you, John, for asking. As you point out, my name is Joe McDonald. I am the Sheriff here of Plymouth County. Going back to 1692, I am the 30th High Sheriff of Plymouth County. And a lot of people smile when I say that. What is the High Sheriff? Mm-hmm. It's got nothing to do with, alcohol consumption or anything like that, like people like to joke about. But, the office of the Sheriff goes back probably to the 8th or 9th century in medieval England. And the Sheriff was assisted in his duties by many deputies, the Under-Sheriff and others, but there was the Under-Sheriff, and that's what we call a special sheriff. They have that other places. Mm-hmm. The High Sheriff is the person who is the actual sheriff, the person who is elected in our tradition or in the English tradition appointed by the King or the Queen. So that's who I am. Originally, I am from the town of Marshfield here. I grew up here. I graduated Marshfield High School in 1984. It was the old building. Yeah. I'm always amazed when I come down here and see all the new construction and how far we've come in those years. But after graduation from Marshfield High School, I went off to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I got an undergraduate degree there. I got my bachelor's degree. And from there, I came home to Marshfield and commuted into Boston to Suffolk University Law School. I graduated in 1991 with my Juris Doctor degree, and I was in private practice for a few years here in Marshfield. And I did a little of everything with a local lawyer, Frank McGee. I'm sure many people remember Frank, and he was, a luminary here in town and a brilliant lawyer and someone I learned a tremendous amount from. But as Frank was winding his practice down, I knew what I always had wanted to do was to be a prosecutor, to work in law enforcement. So I was able, when Mike Sullivan was the district attorney of Plymouth County, I was able to get a job as an assistant DA with Mike Sullivan, and I was there for 9 years. And when I left in 2004, Tim Cruz was the DA.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you were first elected in 2004 to the sheriff's position. What made you decide to run in the first place?
Well, it's interesting. Like I had said, I had always wanted to have a career in law enforcement of some type. To be a prosecutor was a dream come true for me. And Mike Sullivan, to his credit, and I'm eternally grateful for that, gave me an opportunity to become an assistant DA, and that worked out very well. I worked in all of the courts here in Plymouth County, in the district court and the superior court, over the course of that 9 years. And I had pretty much a full legal career. I didn't think so necessarily at the time, but I do remember back in 2004, around even a little bit before that, when Peter Foreman, who had been a great sheriff, he left the sheriff's office to become the chief of staff to Governor, well, actually he was the Secretary of Administration and Finance, and then went from the cabinet to the chief of staff. So that created what really was a tumultuous time at the sheriff's office. You had a number of people that were in, they were out, they had different elections, and there was a tremendous amount of labor unrest down there. The reputation of the agency was really taking a beating. And when I looked and I saw what was happening down there, I thought that I could do a better job. And I threw my hat in the ring. I took a leave of absence from my job as an assistant DA because I thought that was the appropriate thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I ran for the office, and I think, I kid with people now, I was the only person who didn't realize back then that I'd never run for anything in particular, and I didn't have ambitions to run for other things. It wasn't a stepping stone, which it was for a lot of people, the office of the sheriff. So I ran, and I squeaked it out by 997 votes in 2004, and I was sworn in 2005 by Governor Mitt Romney.
So looking back at that time, what have been some accomplishments?
Well, we've accomplished quite a bit. When I say accomplishments, they're not my accomplishments necessarily. Right. They're the accomplishments of the one thing that I suspected very strongly was that there were a lot of really talented people down at the sheriff's office. And it was my impression that they didn't necessarily get to exercise that competence in the way that they should. So when I got there, and if looking back historically, we are really, and it sounds like boasting and bragging, but you'll forgive me. I mean, we are the premier sheriff's office in the entire Commonwealth. Whenever the United States Marshals have a high-profile, real security issue with an inmate or a detainee, there's no question as to where they're going to send them. And this predates my being the sheriff. This is a reflection, really, of the men and women who work down there and the security staff. So, everyone from Whitey Bulger to the shoe bomber who was down there, Richard Reed, those guys did a tremendous, tremendous job. And I think the best accomplishment or the thing that I feel most satisfaction from is putting those people in a position to exercise their talents and their competence, to demonstrate to the world that a good agency is easily becoming a great agency, and allowing those people to rise through the ranks. So, we've really, the secret of the success down there hasn't really been so much anything that I've dreamed up or thought up, although I like to think I've had a few good ideas, but really just the people that surround me, and really the vast majority of them were already there.
So why seek re-election?
Why seek re-election? Well, I think there are certain legacy issues. Well, first off, I love the job, as I anticipated that I would. I get out, I get to meet a lot of people, I get to work with a lot of great people, and I think, one of the most satisfying things, as I run into people sometimes in the community, and they will say to me that, oh, they recognize, oh, you're the sheriff, yeah. And the nice things that, oh yeah, so-and-so that I know was incarcerated and now he's doing well, he did a program while he was there. I've run into former inmates, and they have said the same thing, and it's really, those are the things that make you smile. A lot of times I get a lot of positive feedback on some of the community outreach programs that we're doing with the seniors, with the DA's office. It's very gratifying to do that. Looking back, I see the things that we've done. You don't see every other week a terrible news story about the sheriff's office and all the craziness that was going on. But you see positive stories from time to time, whether it's about the farm or a community program that we're doing, or something, some accomplishment within the correctional facility. I know tomorrow DA Cruz and I are sponsoring a Corey-friendly job fair. So we're trying to help, not just the inmates that are just being released now, but anyone in the city of Brockton that's having a difficult time. If we can get them the job training that they need, get them into jobs. But there are other things too, the legacy issues, as I call them. Things like right now, criminal justice reform is a big thing, and I feel it's incumbent upon me. I have some very strong ideas about what direction we should go with criminal justice reform, and I want to make sure that I am there firmly at the wheel to make sure that criminal justice reform is done, but done in a manner that is a good outcome. We want to protect public safety first and foremost, and see that this is done correctly. And I think I've got a little bit of a fight on my hands, and I may end up coming back because I think it's going to get more interesting before it's all said and done, and we may want to revisit this issue. But for me, the legacy issues, our populations in the jail for various reasons are at historic lows, but we soldier on. We're doing the job and we're getting it done.
Excellent. Yeah. So we always do a little Civics 101 here on the show, and you've kind of answered this. You answered it a little bit earlier. What's the role of the sheriff?
Well, the role of the sheriff is a very interesting role. And in a lot of places, it varies somewhat. I know nationally, a lot of people, they think of the sheriff and, they think of Walt Longmire, or they think of Andy Griffith, But, the office of the sheriff is the oldest governmental institution known to the Western world, with one exception, and that is the king or the queen. And as I said, we go back to the 800s, in medieval England, the reign of Alfred the Great, when he decided he was going to divide, so to manage his kingdom, he divided it into something called shires. Okay. So you had someone that needed to administer the king's law and collect taxes and things like that within that shire. So that person that was appointed by the king was the reeve. And over time, people, what does the term sheriff come from? And what we believe, and I believe this to be true, shire reeve, the shire reeve became the sheriff. So those early sheriffs really exercised virtually all of the power of the king in the king's absence. So they collected taxes, they were military leaders, they were judges, they obviously were peace officers, so they were the ones who administered justice, they sought out fugitives, they imposed punishments, things like that, on the behalf of the king. And in some places, those things still happen. I know in Louisiana, the sheriffs there are tax collectors, and thank God I don't have to do that. And in other places, the sheriffs are the coroners. And once again, I'm glad I don't have to do that. Yeah. But there are many, many duties. Our first and foremost duty here in Massachusetts, we're not so much a frontline law enforcement agency. We do have aspects of road patrol, but we're different from police. Sheriffs and deputy sheriffs are peace officers. So constitutionally, our powers of arrest are a little bit different, but our jurisdiction is wider, bigger. We can generally make arrests on breaches of the peace that happen in our presence. It sounds like a big limitation, but it's really not. It's about 99% of what you would need for a patrol officer out there. So just thinking about it, the only thing I can come up with that we really couldn't do would be like a white collar crime. You couldn't make, but there again, you wouldn't necessarily arrest there. You could summon somebody. So those duties are a little bit different. But here in Massachusetts, and really in the entire state, 14 counties in Massachusetts, 14 sheriffs, all of us, save one, have a correctional facility, which is our primary mission, is county level corrections. And the county that does not have a correctional facility, Nantucket. And it goes, it makes sense. People don't realize sometimes that, like for the DAs, there's a Cape and Islands district. Right. So you've got Barnstable County, and then Martha's Vineyard, which has several towns, but is its own county as well. And then Nantucket, which is smaller, which is only one town, but it's also a county. So you can imagine, they have no correctional facility. They're all transported over to Barnstable County. Dukes County, which is the Vineyard, or as they say, the County of Dukes County, that's the technical term of it. Their correctional facility their capacity is about 30 inmates. Here in Plymouth County, we're one of the larger facilities. Right. Our capacity is about 1,700 inmates. Right now, as we sit here today, we've got about 600 or so. Wow. And there's a lot of reasons that, those numbers have diminished through the COVID times, and it's that's a whole other show. But but at any rate, we have experienced the same growing pains that all of our colleagues in the other counties have. And the sheriffs, as I said, there are 14 of us. 4 of us are Republicans, and the 10 are Democrats. But we work together very well. We meet monthly. We're always helping out. So county level corrections, that's our primary duty. Here in Plymouth County and in Barnstable County, we have crime labs, the BCI crime labs, and we can talk about those. We also have a communications center, and we do CMed, County Medical Emergency Dispatch. We do all the communications, not just for our own dispatching, but for, let's say there's a mass casualty incident or something like that. We are the hub agency that would direct ambulances to the open hospital beds. We do communications between ambulances and hospitals, route them in. Some of the other things, what else does COM have? Well, obviously they do our, we're also, when there is, let's say there's a big fire and mutual aid is brought in from multiple towns, that is all coordinated through our communication center. So we're doing a lot there. I think there's going to be some growth as time goes by and things tend to get regionalized. We realized that there's a lot of savings to be had regionalizing services. So I think you're going to see some more of that. We're standing ready to serve any of the communities in any ways that you can think of. We have our reserve deputy sheriffs that are out there a lot. Our K-9 unit goes out quite a bit. You know, that's another service that's very visible for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talking about the correctional facility and some of the programs it offers to inmates.
Sure. Yeah, the correctional facility, as I said, corrections is our primary mission here in the Commonwealth for all the sheriffs, really. And it's a little bit different than other states in the sense that, you know, in other states, the county, you know, you've got a jail, you've got a house of correction, and you've got prisons. And a lot of people use those terms interchangeably. And they really are somewhat different. And I'll go into a little bit what that is. A jail is a place where someone is held temporarily until they go to trial and are convicted or acquitted. If they're acquitted, they will go home. If they are convicted, they'll be sentenced and either go to the house of correction or the prison. Or if they make bail, they're not held on bail for whatever reason, they come up with that money, so they're released from there. So jail is a pretrial temporary holding facility. So everybody entering the criminal justice system is going to risk that, you know, from the courtroom, they could be sent to jail until they make bail or if they're held without. The house of correction is where individuals who have been convicted of a crime, misdemeanor or a felony, and that person has been sentenced to 2.5 years or less on any single charge. So the longest sentence that we have someone serving as a house of correction sentence, 2.5 years. In most states, that's only a year. So Massachusetts is different that way. Now, if somebody is sentenced to a felony, there could be misdemeanors with it, but you need to have a felony that is 2.5 years or more, they're going to a prison, which is a state prison operated by the state's Department of Corrections. So that's how those things are differentiated. Now, programs you had asked about, that's one of the things I think that really sets us apart. And I don't mean just us in Plymouth County, but all of the sheriffs. We have very, very active rehabilitative programs. And, you know, we come up with new ones all the time. We are borrowing from the other sheriffs. Some of the sheriffs are a little bit more adept at traveling than I, so they go and see these programs that, you know, they're having in other states. And the one thing that I'm very happy to report is that, generally speaking, your most innovative programs are coming out of the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts. And a lot of the other states look to us to see what it is we're doing for rehabilitative programs. So we will have so many different vocational programs, you know. We try to look, when inmates first come into us, they will be classified by classifications officers whose job it is to assess that person, determine what type of a security threat that they pose, and then human service people that will look at that person, study that person's history, criminogenic and otherwise, and make a determination as to what are that person's needs. What is it that brought that person to us in the first place? Is that person a sociopath, or is that person someone with a drug issue? And so often you see those issues where somebody does something, oftentimes or many times a very bad thing, that when they are not under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they would never, ever have done. So, you know, individuals like that, we try to get them on a track where they can, you know, come to terms with their substance use issues, deal with those issues, and then make a go of it outside. A lot of times, you know, the guys that present to us on the outside, you know, they don't have a doctor, they don't have the usual services that you or I, a dentist, those types of things. These are the things that we think about. You know, re-entry is something that we talk a lot about in corrections, knowing that 99.9% of the people that come to us are coming back to the community. So my thought is that, you know, we need to do the best we can by these folks. And my staff, especially on the human service side, they are very, very dedicated to making sure that we get all of those services in a row, get people clean and sober if we can, get them onto medical assisted treatments for other things if they need those. Oftentimes they're health conditions that haven't been dealt with, and make sure that when they get back into the community, they've got, number one, a place to go, They've got services in place so that they're going to be able to continue those, staying on the straight and narrow, hopefully. And then the other half of that equation, or the other side of the coin, is the fact that we want them to be gainfully employed. That's a great thing. And we're constantly working on new programs. So we have job skills that we teach within the jail. We have a food service department where the inmates work. They get Serve Safe certifications. They can get jobs in the food service industry on the outside. We have the farm. Yeah. We haven't had many inmates. COVID has really knocked us back a few years, but we're getting back. We've got a vehicle garage, and oftentimes inmates will go there and they'll learn how to do basic auto mechanics and things like that. So there's a lot of programs, and as I said, tomorrow we're doing a job fair, and there's a lot of, especially in this economy, there seems to be a lot of really reputable employers, legitimate big companies that are really wanting employees, and they're willing to give our guys a shot. So some of the stuff we're doing inside, we'll have programs to teach people. A lot of these folks have never interviewed for a job. Do I wear a tie? Do I not wear a tie? How do I speak to these people? How do I write a resume? How do I present myself? So it's really, it makes me happy to see the folks that are there, and I'll go there tomorrow with DA Cruz, and we'll get a chance to see some of those folks who have come through our facility. And we don't ask any questions about that. They could have gone through another facility, or they may not be criminal justice involved at all. We're just happy to see them, and we want to help them get jobs, because I think the most important thing to keep somebody out of jail is to make sure they have a good job.
You mentioned the farm.
Yes.
So talk about the farm and how it benefits the Sheriff's Department, but the community as a whole.
Sure, yeah. The farm is one of the things that I will take credit for. One of the few things. And obviously I had help dealing with these issues. But when I first came into office in 2005, the farm was slated for sale and development. And I inadvertently attended a meeting that I don't think I was supposed to have attended. And I got wind of what the plan was to develop the farm. And I enlisted the help of some of the local legislators who also were not aware of the development. And we were able to head that off. In fact, it was an amazing issue of like a collective amnesia. We have no idea what you guys are talking about here. So that idea fell by the wayside, and the farm continued. The farm, a lot of people when I first got elected those who were talking about, fiscal issues that we had to deal with early on, like, oh, you have a farm? How long have you had a farm? And I would say, let's see, today is Monday. About 300 years. So we've had that farm a long time. And originally what the farm was designed to do was the public, rightfully so, did not want the inmates to live a life of leisure and be a weight that had to be carried by the community in general. So they wanted the inmates to be, as part of their rehabilitation, their penance, I guess you'd say, they wanted them to support themselves. So the idea was, if you want to eat while you're living in our free heated facility, you're going to get out there and you're going to plant, and you are going to harvest. You will reap what you sow, as they say, and you'll feed yourself, and you're not going to be a burden to the rest of us. And over the years, our populations have grown in such a way, and the land has gotten smaller. Right. It's really outstripped its ability for the inmates to feed themselves. So it's actually more cost effective for us these days to contract with outside food service agencies to bring in food. And we've got, the program has shifted. So now from growing their food, they're getting more into preparing the food. So that is our vocational end of this. But the farm is, as you also note, a very popular and well-received community resource. And what it has become is something far more than I had ever imagined. And you have festivals that we do down there. In the spring, we have one at Christmas time. We usually have Santa there, and in the fall, and the one that's coming up now, and probably my favorite one, is the Harvest Festival. And people come down and they can buy the mums, and they can get pumpkins and corn stalks, and it's really just a wonderful place. The kids come down. We have a petting zoo. we, in the summertime, and really in the spring, summer, and fall, when the weather is good, you will see families doing birthday parties down there for the kids. There's a petting zoo. We brought in, there used to be a dairy herd there, and we have since replaced that. The dairy herd was a lot of work for not a lot of benefit for the correctional facility. So now what we do is we have the cows, they're Scottish breed called Belted Galloways, and they're beef cattle. So we raise them to market weight, and then they're sold, and so we keep that population rotating. So, but the kids love them because they are black on the front end and the back end, and there's a big white stripe in the middle. So the kids refer to them as the Oreo cookies. But yeah, 4-H is doing things over there. The town of Plymouth, the Audubon Society has reached out to us, and they've got some really great programs where we're going to be working with them, growing native plants to repopulate some of these wetlands and other wildlands, to restore them, to push out some of those invasive species and return these habitats. We have had, obviously the farm is a great rehabilitative thing. What else have we got going over there on the farm? The crops that we still raise, thousands of pounds annually, are going to the food banks, and mostly through the South Shore Community Action Council, but some through the Plymouth schools. They have been working and partnering with us so that the kids not only get to see where their food comes from, they get to grow it themselves. And one year they did tomatoes, and they made sauce for pizza and spaghetti, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think going forward, as it becomes less, what's difficult for us right now, during COVID and immediately post-COVID, our populations have dropped, and the reason for that, not just the COVID, but a lot of people who may have been sentenced to a short stint at the House of Correction and been classified in such a way that I could put them on the farm, those folks aren't coming to jail anymore. So one of the things that I think prospectively going forward I want to do is talk to the local probation department in our district courts, starting in Plymouth. So a lot of those people that aren't coming to jail, they can still come and do community service at the farm, knowing that that food is going to the food bank. And I think it's a good thing. And the fact that they're not in the jail, that's probably a good thing too. But I think there's a lot of good that we generate down there at the farm, and I think it can continue well into the future. And I think there is a part, a lot of people may think you don't need a farm anymore, but I think we do. I think it does really good things, John.
So we're on the home stretch here, so we always try to end with some really outside the box questions.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
So what's a Joe McDonald fun fact?
A fun fact. Let's see. I'd have to think about that. I'm a history guy. I love history. I taught history at Quincy College, and I love that. And someday, when I retire from this, I think I'd love to go back and teach history somewhere.
So in the movie about your life, who plays you?
That's a great question. And it's funny, Christine James from WATD once quipped, she once commented that the actor that always reminded her of me, he's since passed away unfortunately, but was Brian Dennehy.
I can see that.
And Christine said, yeah, you're just, and Brian Dennehy he had played sheriffs in several movies, but if you think about it, they weren't really good sheriffs.
No.
He was the sheriff in
Rambo.
First Blood, the first Rambo one, yeah. And then he was the sheriff who was in Silverado with Kevin Kline. But overall, I think, if I could get that, age-appropriate version of Brian Dennehy, that'd be the guy.
If people want to find about you or the department, is there a place they can go?
They can always go to our website, which is www.pcsdma.org. Now, it's interesting to note, I'm in the process of changing a lot of things over, and this is something that was hammered into my head at the National Sheriff's Academy, which I went to early on in my career. We are not a department. We're not the sheriff's department. We are a sheriff's office. And the difference is, it's a very fine difference. We're elected, we're not appointed, which is the case in many, many places. So like the district attorney's office, we are the sheriff's office. So I'm in the process, in fact, I should have brought one, but our shoulder patches, which have the county seal with the Mayflower, 27 pearls for the communities, it said Sheriff's Department on the top. and I took that off and it just says sheriff now, which I think is a nice change. In fact, I had lunch recently with Sheriff Peter Flynn, you know, the former sheriff from, Peter Flynn was sheriff from 1980 to 1994, and I still see him quite a bit. He's a great guy and someone that I call sometimes to bounce issues off of. Sheriff Flynn, I showed him the patch and I asked him, I made some changes, can you tell me what they are? And he looked at it and he said, no, what did you do? And I said, I took off department. And he said, oh, that's a great thing, I wish I had done it. So yeah.
And I know you're running unopposed, but we always ask this question to every candidate.
Yeah.
Why are you the best candidate for the position?
Well, you know, it's there are, I suppose my detractors would say, yeah, well, he's the best candidate because he's the only one. But you know, I think going beyond that, I think I've done a pretty good job as the sheriff. I've been there. I'm in my 18th year, and people, you know, no sooner did I arrive there than people had started asking me, well, what are you running for next? And I said, well, I think I'd like to try my hand at this first before I make a decision like that. And I really, you know, or how long are you going to be the sheriff? And my answer back then is the same as it is today, until it's not fun anymore. And I think, you know, I'm still having fun. I'm still learning things every day. I'm blessed to be surrounded by such a great staff down there, really at every level. And there's a lot of things I want to accomplish, not the least of which, you know, keep our correctional facility at the top-notch level that it is, but also expanding our abilities under the new criminal justice reform. Because I think that's something, if we don't get criminal justice reform right, there are going to be some very bad consequences for our communities. You know, we've seen it nationally. I don't want it to come here.
Yeah, well, we want to thank you for joining us today, and want to wish you the best of luck going forward.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate the invite, and I'll come back and we'll see how we're doing with this criminal justice reform.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
That's all the time we have for Meet the Candidates. Until next time, make it a great day.